Hair as dark as night slips down her back as she crouches down next to the creek and sinks her hand into the cool water. A dress as white as her hair is black drapes over her frame. It's a haunting image, made even more eerie by the fact that there is no sound save the tinkling water of the stream. But then, the rough hiccup of a woman crying splits through the silence, growing louder and louder until the woman with the long black hair and the white as white dress turns and looks directly at you. Still, the desperate wailing surrounds you, picking up speed, picking up strength, until there is very present danger, and fear that something is wrong. And her face? It's not human. Maybe blank with no features at all, no eyes, no nose, no mouth from whence the wailing came. Hers is the face of La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman. And the fact that you've met her acquaintance? We wish you the best of luck, for, as the legend goes, her presence almost always meets with death, disease, or something else horrifyingly bad. Quote, GhostCityTours.com. Texas is a massive state with plenty of history. With history come stories, and with stories come legends. This is one of them. The legend of La Llorona is about the spirit of a doomed mother who drowned her children, and now spends eternity searching for them in rivers and lakes. There are many interpretations to the legend, but the one most commonly accepted was that La Llorona was once a caring woman full of life and love named Maria, who married a wealthy man who lavished her with gifts and attention. However, after she bore him 2 sons, he began to change, returning to a life of womanizing and alcohol, often leaving her for months at a time. He seemingly no longer cared for the beautiful Maria, even talking about leaving her to marry a woman of his own wealthy class. When he did return home, it was only to visit his children, and the devastated Maria began to feel resentment towards the boys. One evening, as Maria was strolling with her 2 children on a shady pathway near the river, her husband came by in a carriage with an elegant lady beside him. He stopped and spoke to his children, but ignored Maria, and then drove the carriage down the road without looking back. After seeing this, Maria went into a terrible rage, and turning against her children, she seized them and threw them into the river. As they disappeared downstream, she realized what she had done, and ran down the bank to save them, but it was too late. Maria broke down into inconsolable grief, running down the streets screaming and wailing. The beautiful La Llorona mourned them day and night. During this time she would not eat, and walked along the river in her white gown searching for her boys, hoping they would come back to her. She cried endlessly as she roamed the river banks, and her gown became soiled and torn. When she continued to refuse to eat, she grew thinner and appeared taller until she looked like a walking skeleton. Still a young woman, she finally died on the banks of the river. Not long after her death, her restless spirit began to appear, walking the banks of the Santa Fe River when darkness fell. Her weeping and wailing became a curse of the night, and people began to be afraid to go out after dark. She was said to have been seen drifting between the trees along the shoreline, or floating on the current with her long white gown spread out upon the waters. On many a dark night people would see her walking along the riverbank and crying for her children. While women tend to catch a glimpse of her long black hair, it is the men who more frequently hear her desperate pleas. "Mi hijo, mi hijo," she's known to shout, calling for sons that have been gone for generations. And so, they no longer spoke of her as Maria, but rather La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. Children are warned not to go out into the dark, for La Llorona might snatch them, throwing them to their deaths into the flowing waters. As a word to the wise, don't rush out to save her, should you find her in the depths of the river. Those who have gallantly attempted to pull her from the water have found themselves in a watery grave. The legend is told as a cautionary tale to misbehaving children and selfish adults alike to keep them in line. Though perceived as a myth, La Llorona has been heard at night, wailing next to rivers by many, and her wanderings have grown wider, following Hispanic people wherever they go. Her movements have been traced through the Southwest and as far as Montana on the banks of the Yellowstone River. The Hispanic people believe that the weeping woman will always be with them, following the many rivers looking for her children, and for this reason many of them fear the dark, and pass the legend from generation to generation.